What is up, YouTube? My name is Alex. Welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. Today we are in beautiful Medellin, Colombia, staying in the Buenos neighborhood. And I'm just kind of wrapping up my 5-ish months of traveling through South America, from Argentina to Uruguay to Peru to Mexico to Colombia. And I want to share kind of my take on the best city in Latin America to digital nomad in. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so when it comes to comparing cities in Latin America, there's a lot of things that I look for, and of course I've talked about in some of my other videos as well. Everything from safety to cost to quality of life. Hopefully that sounds better. Quality of life to cost to nightlife to food to fitness culture to access to other cities and other countries. And of course that changes a lot of the variables depending on your priorities for you being a digital nomad or for someone who likes to travel in general and maybe wants to do a sabbatical and stay in some of these cities for a bit longer term. My style of travel is always a bit more of like a slow mad. I think I'd like to stay at minimum 1 month in each city. I think any faster than that, you really don't get to have the full feel of what it's like to live there. I'm in Medellin right now, and last year I was here for almost 3 months. And then this year, obviously I have a very different experience of what it's like now that my Spanish is fairly different. But looking back, I think I wasn't until like the month 2 of being here that I felt comfortable and was actually enjoying my time and was able to go out and do things and experience the city life and what it's like to actually be living here in Medellin. This time around, because I know the city already, I know some of the hot spots and where to go on certain nights, and some of the nuances of speaking with Colombians, like some of the slang for paisas and all that. I think I was able to get a little bit more comfortable faster. I've only been here a week so far, and I'm already feels like home, to be honest. I mean, I've been traveling, I've been on the road for a long time during this trip, but I think Medellin is already starting to feel like a place that I could stay long-term in. So for me, that's really ideal. So everywhere I've been, let's talk about the different cities and kind of my experience. I started in Argentina, so I flew from Miami to Bogota, layover in Bogota to Buenos Aires. Then I was in Buenos Aires for quite a while. I wasn't supposed to be there that long, but because of the disruption of the protests in Peru, I ended up shortening the length of that trip down to like 4 days instead of a month that I was supposed to be in Lima. But I still got a pretty good feel of what it was like to be there, despite all the protests and despite some of the disruptions to the actual city life. But let's start from my first city. Buenos Aires for me was absolutely incredible. I was so happy being there. As a Canadian who hates the cold, it was ideal for me. It was very hot every single day. It was beautifully humid, not like jungle, kind of like Medellin is very humid, but not dry either. It was just like the perfect temperature and perfect air quality for me. Like there's a reason like Buenos Aires is like good air, right? It's absolutely beautiful. The city itself has a ton of like modernization to it, but still you feel like you're living in a giant park basically. They have so much green space, and they actually have some building bylaws that one of my friends who I had met was living there was telling me about, where essentially every building that goes up, they have to build like an equally sized footprint of green space. So that's why there's really just trees everywhere, and every time there's a high-rise building across the street, there's generally going to be a park, because that's how you get away with building the high-rises. So I absolutely loved it. I think the people in Buenos Aires were incredible. The food was good. It took me a little bit of time to actually get finding healthy places to eat. I will admit it was a bit difficult to find consistently healthy options when I did first get there. And the Porteño Spanish was a little bit difficult for me to pick up. Because my tutor's Colombian, I've been learning Colombian Spanish, my best friend's Colombian. This was the first Latin American country where I was actually learning Spanish, was in Colombia. So for me, like going to Argentina where they say like Asia, Botella, Pocho, Cache, like they pronounce things very differently than most of the other Latin America. It was an interesting learning curve, but by the end I was pretty comfortable with it. Fitness culture there was very prominent. They had a lot of gyms in the Palermo neighborhood, and really easy to find one that I could stay in for a period, like a longer period of time. But with that said, I think there was a couple things that I took for granted, and that's likely, like, I've been taking Spanish classes for like 9 months now, so I think if you didn't speak Spanish at all, you would have had a drastically different experience. Not necessarily that Argentinians are rude to foreigners, but they treat you a lot more respectfully when you're actually speaking Spanish to them, because not a lot of people speak great English in the city of Buenos Aires, and especially as you get more rural into Argentina. I went to like Cordoba and Bariloche in Patagonia, and there really wasn't much English at all. So for me, having that advantage was really, really powerful. I was able to go on dates with locals. I was able to go to like some of the local football matches and go to the casino and do things like that really, it makes it difficult if you don't speak the language. So I would say Buenos Aires is incredible if your Spanish is decent or better. If you're fluent, you're gonna have an amazing time. People are incredible, they're so friendly. It's such a clean city. It has like all the amenities you could look for. I would say one of the things that was a bit difficult was actually grocery shopping. They didn't have a ton of larger chain grocery stores. Like, I'm in Colombia right now, and they have like Exitos, which are like pretty traditional sized grocery stores. It was kind of difficult to find something like that. I did end up finding one, but it just took me a little bit longer. So Buenos Aires for me is probably my favorite city of all time. I can't wait to go back, and ideally I'd like to get like permanent residency at some point. That's how much I loved Argentina. While I was down there, incredible time. After Argentina, well, I guess while I was still there, I went to Uruguay, to Montevideo, which is the capital city, very close to Buenos Aires, really easy to get there. And as you'd expect, well, it is a different country, I guess, but partially as you'd expect, the people of Uruguay were very, very similar to that of Argentina. From the way they speak Spanish, they both speak like the porteño, like I said, with the double L, they say it like a sh sound. So that was not that difficult. At that point, I've been in Argentina for a couple months, so it was pretty easy for me to pick up that dialect. But at the same time, it was, in my opinion, I don't think as safe, Montevideo, as Buenos Aires. When I was in BA, I never really felt uncomfortable. There wasn't like people looking at me, and you could kind of feel like you're being targeted. Like, that stuff just never really happened while I was in BA. But when I got to Montevideo, I kind of felt like that. Like, it just felt a little bit sketchier. The streets weren't as clean, which I thought was a bit interesting, considering Uruguay is like considered one of the more richer and more stable economies in Latin America. And especially Montevideo, if you actually look up some of the financial statistics, is supposed to be the biggest, like the most prosperous city of all of like Latin America. And like 9th highest per capita in the world for major cities, something like that. So like pretty incredible financial statistics, but when I was there, it just didn't really feel like that. One of the other things that I thought was challenging was the neighborhoods you stayed in. So we stayed in the Salina Montevideo, which was kind of on like the eastern coast. And you get to the port kind of on the western coast of the city. And it made it a bit more difficult to get around in the nightlife because it wasn't very congregated. Like in Palermo and Buenos Aires, everything's really tight knit and it's easy to get around. But Montevideo, you pretty much had to Uber everywhere. So for me, I would say that's not really one of my favorite cities, but it was a good time nonetheless. And I had fun, I'm glad I did it, but I probably wouldn't recommend going back to Montevideo if I had the choice. Okay, then after Uruguay, I went to Lima, Peru, as I was making my way back up north. And actually a really, really good time in Peru. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, and I'd like to go back and give it more of a fair chance, but I ended up having an awesome time in Lima. City itself, again, in Miraflores is where I was staying. It was very modern, very clean, very like well updated, like good infrastructure, good resources, good way of living for most people, I think, in that neighborhood. It was a bit more expensive than Buenos Aires, candidly. So I would say from a cost perspective, BA was definitely the most cost effective of any of the cities I went to this year. They're kind of going through a bit of an economic crisis, candidly. But as a foreigner, you can definitely candidly take advantage of it. So it's not like a bad thing if you're traveling there, but you do need to be aware, like not to be a dick to the locals about how cheap everything is, because really it's pretty crazy time for them. Peru itself was really, really fun. The airport was kind of like had some fuckery going on where there was a lot of taxi drivers like trying to take advantage of people who didn't speak Spanish. And ironically, after I started talking to some of the locals, a lot of really good English, at least in the Miraflores neighborhood, which was a bit of a contrast from, like I said, in Palermo, where not too many people spoke that good of English. So it was kind of an interesting sidebar there to see. People of Peru were also very nice to me as a foreigner. Again, like having the benefit of speaking Spanish definitely helped. But overall, I had an amazing time in Lima. I was only there for a few days, but city itself, obviously incredible food. Peruvian food is one of the best in the world, they say. And I think if you're in Lima, you'd be hard pressed to not find an incredible restaurant every single day of the week. So highly recommend Lima as well. Then after Lima, I continued moving north to Mexico City, Mexico, La Ciudad de Mexico. One of the biggest cities in the world, absolutely massive metropolis of a place, which has pretty much everything you could want. Now, in my personal experience, I think Buenos Aires was a better city for me, for what I look for. But for most people, I think Mexico City, there's a reason why there's so many Americans going there and it's being really gentrified, is because it's just so easily accessible from most like North American or English speakers. For a few reasons. A really solid infrastructure. It's easy to get around. Condesa, Roma Norte are very walkable, so you don't have to worry about finding a metro or finding an Uber every single time. You can walk pretty much everywhere you need to. It's like one of those 15-minute cities, you know, like everything is within a 15-minute walk, a gym, a grocery store, a movie theater, like, you know, whatever you're looking for, it's all within that walking distance. I will say the foreigners were a little bit more abrasive towards, the locals were a little bit more abrasive towards tourists, and I think rightfully so. There's been a ton of Americans there that, in my experience, were pretty rude to the locals and not showing the respect to a foreign country that they should. So I did my best to try and be as respectful as possible, like I always try to do. But there were some dickhead Americans that I saw, unfortunately, just being pretty rude. So if you are going to go there, definitely be respectful of the fact that you're not in your home country, you are in someone else's. Try and learn at least like the greetings and basic Spanish before you go there. It's going to go a long way and get you treated a little bit better than just saying no hablo español. Like it doesn't come across as good as if you know a little bit more and you actually put in the work to learn a few things. So overall, I would say Mexico City, the food, obviously one of the biggest culinary powerhouses in the world. Some of the best restaurants from like, the world's top 50s are there. You've got like Pujol, you've got Quintonillo, some of the best cocktail bars in the world as well. So I think really it has everything for everyone. There's a lot more like affordable places if you want to do that, but if you do want to ball out, you can do that as well. Fitness culture, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I think in Mexico City, maybe there was a better gym that I never ended up finding, but of the ones I tried, they were all kind of like a little bit smaller and none of them had that bigger open feeling gym that I like that lets you kind of spread out, get a little bit more comfortable with the space and really understand how you want to approach your fitness regime. Didn't really find that in any of the places I went to in Condesa or Roma Norte, but maybe there's a different one outside of those areas that I just never went to. Safety, cost-wise, not that big of a cost savings, honestly. As a Canadian, I was saving maybe like 30% from back home, so considering how, where that is and the differences in safety and quality of life, it was a little concerning, I think, that was the cost of those areas. Granted, if you move out of the major tourist areas, of course, it's gonna be a lot more affordable, but for most people, that's where you're gonna be staying anyways. Safety-wise, very safe. Obviously, don't be drunk off your ass running around at 4 a.m., but other than that, you'd be completely fine. And then finally, the last stop of where my Latin American journey has taken me. I am currently in Medellin, Colombia, and it is my second time here. I spent almost 3 months here last year as well, and this time, at that time, I didn't speak any Spanish at all, so this time I do, and it's been an interesting contrast. Because last time I was here, I didn't really feel too comfortable. It was one of my first times staying an extended period in another country, especially in Latin America, especially somewhere where I don't speak the language. And it was kind of a scary time, I'll be honest. I felt kind of pressured. I didn't know how to dress properly as well, so I kind of stood out, I just looked like an asshole. And this time around, I know to wear mostly dark clothing. Of course, I'm still a white boy in Medellin, so I'm gonna stand out, but just dressing a little bit less of a rich douche, people just respect you a little bit more and you get less eyes on you, I guess, as you're walking around. Knowing definitely Spanish has changed my experience here. Colombian people, especially paisas, are very friendly, very warm. Even if you're a foreigner, they'll be patient with you speaking Spanish, and there won't be any concerns about you not being able to speak fluently. They're very open to it. The food here is incredible. It's funny, I think most of the food that isn't Colombian here in Medellin is awesome, but the Colombian food I don't think is the best of any national food. I think Peruvian or Mexican food in general is just better than Colombian, even Argentinian. So for me, it's been enjoyable to try the food, but at the same time, I'm well, maybe I'm not gonna have a ton of it for a continued amount of time. Fitness culture here, there is two really big SmartFit gyms in Poblado. There's SmartFit in Santa Fe Mall, as well as the Golden Mile Mall. And both of those are really big open gyms. You're not crowded and stepping on top of people. For me, that's much more in line with what I look for in my ideal gym. So here it's been really easy to just stick to my fitness routine. There's also a ton of just walking and like uphill and being outside here that makes it easy to get your steps in and get your like, you know, low intensity steady state in throughout the day. Safety, of course, this is probably the least safe of all the cities I've been to. I haven't had any direct concerns this time around, but a lot of people do when they come to Colombia. If you're dressing, you know, like an asshole, you're not being, you know, you're not being aware of your surroundings. You're wearing like a Rolex, you're dressing like too flashy. Like it's really easy to be targeted here, and there definitely is like pickpockets and like street violence and just overall like a sense of not as much safety as some of the other cities I've been to. But at the same time, we were here for almost 3 months last year, had no direct issues. I haven't had anything this time around, and hopefully nothing will unless something chaotic happens over the next few weeks. But overall, I think Medellin is a good place if you're a little bit more of a seasoned traveler, if your Spanish is a little bit better, if you've been to some of these other cities. Like coming back here now, a year after being a nomad and moving around all the time, I'm infinitely more comfortable than I was the first time through here. But if this is your first city that you've ever really worked abroad in, you may have a difficult time getting comfortable and really starting to enjoy the city. So that would be my recommendation. So overall, those are the cities I've been to in Latin America over the last few months and my kind of take on it. I do think Mexico City is probably the safest bet for anyone, male, females, you know, whatever you identify as, solo traveler, group traveler, couple traveler, whatever it is that you're thinking about doing. I just think Mexico City has a lot of the same luxuries that you would be used to at home and a lot of the same niceties. The main airport is like 20 minutes from your neighborhood. It's in the middle of the city. It's super easy to get to. They have tons of flights in and out of that airport from pretty much anywhere else in North America, US, Canada, South America, wherever you are. They also just have a lot of things for you to do. Like Mexico City, you never have to leave that municipality. You can find pretty much everything you'd ever want to do, from museums to events to football matches to concerts, like whatever you're looking for, they literally will have it in Mexico City. So for that reason, I think it's probably the best bet for your first time digital nomading in Latin America, Mexico City. Well, that's gonna be pretty much the video. I hope this was useful in sharing my experiences of where I've been over the last few months. As a gringo, I'm Canadian, not American, but I know I still look like a gringo. And my experience of traveling the last few months through Latin America. Hopefully this was useful. If it was, feel free to leave a comment and a like in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. But that's pretty much gonna be the video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. My name's Alex. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.